All right, so thank you all for joining us today. Like I mentioned, I'm Cynthia Wills. I'm with our Higher Opportunity Neighborhoods team as well as Damien. We are in our third year of doing the Housing Policy and Advocacy RFP. Some of you may already be familiar with this work. We started it in 2021 to support housing policy and advocacy because we understood that there was a scarcity of funding for this work. And, through our learning, we decided that, it's important to continue to support this work. And we learned that timing was really important. So we wanted to align our timeline with the legislative session. So in our first year, we started this RFP in November, I believe, and we've kind of been moving it up. So this year we opened it up in August. We'll share a little bit more about the timeline as we move forward, but this is really to help us in achieving our overarching mission. At the Hartford Foundation, our mission is to dismantle structural racism and, address economic and social mobility. So this is part of our work, and it's a key and critical part of it. So move forward. So this grant is to support policy and advocacy activities. This could include administrative advocacy, state legislative advocacy, and municipal advocacy. We really also want to support organizations that are working directly with residents with lived experience. So it could include organizing and working directly with those that are really moving this work forward. So we're really hoping to get some organizations that are working directly with residents. These activities are aimed at preventing and addressing homelessness and creating pathways to more accessible and affordable, stable housing. This is a key component of our higher opportunity neighborhoods work, really striving to have more affordable housing options for residents. So organizations that are eligible to apply are 501c3 organizations, but we also encourage community groups that are working with the fiscal agent to apply as well. If an organization currently receives core support through the Hartford Foundation, you would not really be eligible to apply due to one of our new policies. But if you do have questions around that, you could always reach out to me or Damien or another officer at the foundation, and we can clarify whether or not you're eligible or not. Or if you have other questions about your eligibility, you could reach out as well. If you did receive a grant through this opportunity in 2021 or 2022, we do ask that you submit your final report before you complete an application for this year. We would really like to know how your work is moving forward and learn a little bit more about what you've done before we learn about new work that you're interested in doing. So if you have questions about that, you can reach out to us as well. So the grant goes up to $25,000, the max that can be requested. And so this can cover a multitude of expenses. It can include temporary staffing, stipends for volunteers or residents that are involved in this work, contracting for professional services, materials, marketing, etc. If you had questions about whether or not something was eligible, you could also reach out and we can help clarify that. But this is pretty flexible in terms of what you can cover with the $25,000 up to amount. So to walk you through the timeline, the application is now open as of yesterday. So you can go in and read through some of the questions and learn a little bit more about this process. Applications are due September 11th, so a little more than a month away. And our hope is to give grant awards by the end of October so that funds can be disseminated before the start of 2024. These grants could go from 6 months to a year, depending on the timeline of the activities that are being proposed. So now I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Damien, who's going to walk through the rubric.
Thank you so much, Cynthia, for that part of the presentation. I'm going to go through the rubric and let me know. Well, we have a question section at the end, but after I do the rubric section, I'll be sharing the rubric into the chat so you could have it for your own review. But it's also on the Hartford Foundation website. So the criteria of the rubric is we grade each grant. The grading team currently as it stands would be myself, Cynthia, and Chris. Each section of the rubric will be graded on the score of 1 to 5 along the criteria of the proposed policy changes. If successful, would it make a meaningful difference to the lives of low-income residents or people of color? Are residents suffering from barriers of sustainable or affordable housing or housing quality? That will be graded on a 1 to 5, and going down from there. Referencing what Cynthia had mentioned about having residents with lived experience, the build out of the work that's being conducted, is it being done in partnership with residents? Their thought being included, or their partnership being included in how this work is put together. Is this work used? Is it going to promote the voice and or leadership of residents with lived experience? Is there evidence to support the potential effectiveness of the work being done? We're all aim at the foundation for new ideas, but it has to find some level of this can work, this will work, is thrown together in a manner that if granted, it will be something that will be beneficial to a community and be effective in that manner. And those basically going down from the rubric, we get to the end of the rubric. As I said, it's a 1 to 5 scoring. The proposed strategies or activities have likelihood of moving the outcomes forward. And definitely your reporting section, I think, is the next. Can you hit the next slide for me? Absolutely. So as Cynthia said, reporting. If you have a question on if you completed your reporting or how the reporting is completed, definitely get in contact with myself or Cynthia. If you received last year a grant from last year, the year before, we do ask that you do your reporting. We'll be checking back through our system to make sure that reports are completed for the housing policy RFP, because some nonprofits in the sector have multiple grants. So sometimes you could complete one report for one grant, but it's not necessarily the report for other grants. So just make sure that your report is complete. And if you have a question, definitely reach out to Cynthia or myself. Reporting, it tracks multiple metrics, qualitative and quantitative. So looking for statistical data, but also looking for some narrative on work that was conducted, the type of activities that were conducted, what metrics we're using to record data, demographics of stakeholders involved, staff, volunteers, and the frequency of the types of engagement. The report is a critical for foundation learning and for us to gather how the work is doing. So if this grant request is proposed to be continuing of work that was already done, we'd like to know how effective was it and what is the proposed next plans for it. So reporting for foundation purposes, foundation grants, is definitely imperative. that is the end of my section on the presentation. I think, Chris, you are man up next.
Thank you very much, Damien. So I've been asked to kind of go through some of the projects that have been funded in the past, and I think I'm not going to read ad nauseum through the entire list in great detail, but I do think it highlights the kind of broad types of programs and projects we've supported in the past. A lot of it is certainly direct state legislative lobbying, including we have one example where somebody basically used the money to hire a lobbyist, and it's kind of an illustration of how government works. That one actually got a bill passed. So sometimes it does help to hire professionals. Though we, generally would prefer this be more grassroots, resident-led activity. It doesn't always have to be, and sometimes, that's not always the best way to get stuff done. So some of the examples here, and as you see, a lot of them are local municipal work, and it's, as much about public education as it is about mobilizing and making direct policy changes. The Center for Latino Progress, through its Transport Hartford Academy, did a lot of work around transit-oriented development, in not only in Hartford, but also in adjacent communities such as Newington. We had the busways, and there's been back and forth about whether or not people want to build housing in these areas. Fortunately, some towns such as West Hartford have kind of embraced that, whereas other towns have not. And the Center for Latino Progress has been working in partnership with Desegregate Connecticut, who obviously does a lot of work in that space as well. We certainly encourage people to collaborate with other organizations when it makes sense. Another great example of a kind of a really hyper-local project is Center for Leadership and Justice, building off their very successful and effective No More Slumlords campaign, which mobilized tenants. Hartford eventually did pass regulations to change their policies towards absentee landlords, but we all know that the devil's in the implementation. So the Center for Leadership and Justice's job is to get those resident advocates to make sure that the city is doing its job. And you have seen some positive movement this year, and I have no doubt a lot of that is attributed to their work. The Connecticut Fair Housing Center did work to kind of promote and kind of monitor the impact of the right to counsel legislation that was passed a couple sessions ago to prevent people from being evicted. And they worked in coalition with other organizations to provide technical assistance and advocates and attorneys to do a better job to connect folks to the legal services they need. Hartford Land Bank was the example I referenced at the beginning, who actually created some legislation with the hopes of creating a fund to make up a gap in funding that people could get when they redevelop in urban areas, because a lot of times banks won't give you the amount of money you need to successfully redevelop in the cities because they don't consider the properties worth that. So the idea of this proposal was to fill that gap with state funding. Now, the issue becomes it was passed through a bonding bill, and I'm still unclear as to whether or not, and this is all about the implementation piece, I'm still unclear as to whether or not that bond money has been freed up to actually implement this what was successful legislation. So that's something you have to kind of keep your eye on as you go through these processes. And I can go to the next slide. And our friend Larry Harvey, who's joining us today, once incarcerated anonymous, and their work is really focused on engaging and mobilizing and educating justice impacted communities to give them the people the tools they need to be their own advocates on a variety of issues, including housing, but not limited to. And it's really been impressive to see all of the programming that Larisse has supported in partnership with others. She often brings in experts from other organizations, including some of our other grantees, which has been great. Open Community Alliance continues to struggle to implement the Fair Share zoning campaign. They did see some success this year, albeit incremental. to make sure that every town in Connecticut provides access to affordable housing in their communities. It's a very politically charged issue, one that's not going to get fixed quickly because the political will, and especially in some of our suburbs, and we read stories about it every day, where people are fighting even the most limited proposals for affordable housing. But this year they did get some passed to at least implement, have the state do a study of what the housing needs are in the hopes that, it'll create a clearer picture of what towns should be doing and aren't. You can go to the next slide. Our good friends, the Partnership for Strong Communities, who will not be applying this year because they did receive a core support grant for their work. Through their home, they wanted to expand and diversify the membership of its Home Connecticut campaign, which is a broad coalition of stakeholders who are working to increase access to quality, stable, affordable housing in Connecticut. And being a member of that group, I can say that the membership was expanded significantly. It also created challenges because the larger the group is, the harder it is to agree on things. But I think they brought in some very unique and interesting perspectives that really were missing from that discussion. So I'm glad that we were able to help with that. And finally, Regional Planning Association, when we better, most people know them here as Desegregate Connecticut. Their work around transit-oriented communities, and again, while they weren't successful in getting the whole package of proposals they had tried to get through, they did get portions of it enacted at the end of session. So we were grateful for that. And again, recognizing a lot of this work takes a long time, right? It's not going to get done in a year, and not even get done in 2 years. And even when you think you've got it done, it's probably not done. And I was just reading, some studies about how, like, it really, the thing that makes things stick and the things that make things effective long term really is bringing in residents, really is creating that network of system of resident advocacy to keep that drumbeat going after the legislature is closed for the year, and then into the next year and the next and the next, just to constantly keep up and keep track and hold people accountable. So we're really excited to see some new folks here and some people that we've seen before. And we're really hoping, again, a lot of this can be just like, some of our groups that I haven't mentioned here have gone out into some of those suburban communities. Residents from those communities have led that work and brought in other people to talk about why affordable housing shouldn't be such a scary thing for you, right? Like why affordable housing won't ruin your property values and hurt your town, but it actually will improve your town and create a more vibrant, robust community. And there's a lot of work to be done around that to create that political will. You need to convince local and state officials that you're not going to necessarily lose an election because you support, affordable housing or services for the homeless or things of that nature. A lot of times there are a lot of people that support those things, but that's not the ones they hear from. They hear from the people that don't like it and don't want it. And it's easy to assume that that's the majority of the folks in your community when that's not always true. So I will leave it at that. I'll stop making my pitch. You're already here. I don't need to do that with you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to, either ask them now, or I know we're going to have contact information. You can reach out to any one of us.
I just want to echo also what Chris had said. I love that there are multiple groups on this info session that have not applied before. And Cynthia said we have time, I believe September 11th is the closing. So there's still time to think about your ideas, to reach us, to have conversation if you would like to, if you feel like it's needed. But that there are groups on here that have not applied last year or the last 2 years. And so to continue to grow this work, it continue to be a partnership with different ideas and different nonprofits.
All right. Well, if there's no more questions, you can feel free to grab our emails from the chat, and feel free to reach out at any time and ask us any questions you may have. This recording will be shared. We'll email it and also post it on our website, so others can access it. So thank you so much for joining us today.